My name is Dan Dorval, and I'm President and CEO of Dorval Chorne Financial Advisors. I am an independent certified financial planner and author of my book, Financial Success for the Rest of Us, Reality-Based Financial Planning for Mainstream America.
Hi, my name is Leah Woodley. I'm an associate financial advisor with Dorval Chorne Financial Advisors. Our conversations discuss what it means to do quality of life planning in all areas of your life.
Dan, you recently shared a story about a 58-year-old nurse that really caught my attention. Can you walk us through what happened?
Well, this particular nurse, she was widowed and she was getting ready for retirement. And what had happened is she had met with an advisor and she had money that she had worked very hard to save over the years. And one of the things that this advisor did is they put a certain amount of her money into an annuity. And that particular annuity, when I reviewed it, I looked at it and I'm like, I don't really understand what they were doing. First thing is they were taking income from this annuity, which when you're under the age of 59 and a half is usually that's a no-no because it could potentially be taxed and penalized 10% for taking it out prior to age 59 and a half. And then the second thing was it was in an indexed version of an annuity, which tends to have provisions that can change over time once you're already in the contract. And they can be really a major hurdle to actually earning money on your account. In her case, we reviewed going back through the history of the account, which had a pretty long history. And she had made a couple percent per year during a time where the markets had been very, very good. So I was able to show her that she had sacrificed a lot of returns in exchange for the promise that she couldn't lose money. And so that's how these people sell these annuities. But then when we looked at the income stream, I was like, okay, this doesn't make any sense to me. She didn't need the money. She's still working. She had other sources of funds that would have made more sense. And so when we talked to her tax professional, we actually found out that the advisor had set up what is called a 72T provision.
Mm.
So she was not actually paying a penalty because she had set up substantially equal payments, which lock her in to do those payments for at least 5 years and until age 59 and a half. Well, in her case, I'm looking at this going, I have no idea why this advisor would do this because the income was still taxable. It came from gains, so it was taxable as income. And second, she was locked into an income stream that she didn't need. And she was still working. And now she's looking for flexibility to use that money in other ways. She has no flexibility because once you're locked in a 72T, until you've satisfied the 5 years in age 59 and a half, you don't have any flexibility. If you change it
Mm.
retroactively, they go back and they'll penalize you in, like backwards. So I look at these things and I go, okay, the annuity is a tool, and it's a tool that can work for some people. A 72T is a strategy, and it's a strategy that can work for some people. But in this case, it's almost like the advisor said, okay, there's a tool. I'm going to use it regardless of your situation. And there's a strategy that's available. And I'm going to use a strategy without considering your options. And so it's not like they did anything technically wrong. I mean, she didn't have to pay penalties, but at the same time, the tool and the strategy, it's almost like it had nothing to do with her. And I don't
Mm.
know anything about this particular advisor, but my guess is they probably do these things to the same, like they just do the same things over and over and over. And they act like it's adding value to somebody when in all reality, it might add value to one relationship. In this case, a very rare relationship, because we've only used 72T provisions for a handful of clients over the years. And we certainly don't use indexed annuities very often. That's a very rare thing. So it would be a rare client. And yet in this case, I'm guessing he does it for almost everyone. So she's 58 years old. She's talking about retiring, in the upcoming future here. And we showed her how to align her investments, much more strategically with what she's trying to do to give her greater flexibility, to give her greater options. And one of the first things we did is we took money from a different account and paid off all of her debts, which then made cash flow work very easily for her.
Wow. I was thinking the same thing when you were speaking about the advisor just kind of giving a cookie cutter approach to everyone. That's what I felt. And financial planning should absolutely be personal to each person's unique situation. So I'm glad that we were able to look at her particular situation and align her resources with her goals. Now, for someone who's watching who doesn't understand annuities well, can you explain what an indexed annuity is in simple terms?
Well, it's not that easy to do in simple terms because I think the whole point of these annuities is to make them as complicated as possible because that makes it easier to sell. Now, there are lots of different types of indexed annuities. In this particular case, so all an annuity is it's a tool where if you put money into it, it is tax deferred. So I don't pay taxes on it while it's just sitting there. But when I take the money out, in this case, it's a non-qualified annuity. You could also have like a qualified annuity with an IRA or Roth IRA or something else. That's almost always a no-no. But in this case, it was used correctly with a non-qualified annuity, so it was tax deferred. But as she was taking money out, it forces her to take the gains first, and it forces them to be taxed as income. Well, right now she's still working, so she has a fairly high income. So it's being taxed at the highest tax rates she's probably ever going to pay.
Mm,
In retirement, she's going to have lower income, so she won't pay as high a taxes. And so this indexing part, what that means is a person selling it can say your investments are tied to a certain, let's say, stock index. It might be the S&P 500. There's all sorts of indices that they can tie this to. And so let's just say the S&P 500, that's the most common one. So if the S&P goes up, they say, "Oh, you're going to earn money based on the returns of the stock market." Sounds great. But if the stock market is negative or any index you have is negative, you will never lose money. So the worst you can do is zero, okay? And the best you
mm,
can do is some amount greater than zero. It's that some amount greater than zero that gets to be confusing because most people just think, oh, well, it's the stock market. If the stock market goes up 20%, I'm going to make 20%. But I like the idea I'm never going to lose money. Well, that is not how it works. In this particular case, she had something called a spread. And a
mm,
spread, it likely started for her with a spread of maybe 2 or 3%. So if the stock market gets 20%, there's a spread. If that spread is 3%, I would be credited with 17% of gains. The insurance company basically, the spread allows them to pay for the options they need in order to do this annuity. So I'm still getting this great return. Okay. I like that. The problem is that once you're in the contract, the insurance company has the right typically to change the rules. So it's not so much the rules when you bought it that might be a problem, it's the rules after the fact. Her spread at this point in time was 9%. That means if the S&P 500 earned 10%, her spread was 9, she made a 1% rate of return. The S&P had to have great performance in order for her to make any actual money. I had never seen a spread that high, and I guarantee the spread was not that high when she started. She didn't know. And so it got worse as time went on. So in this case, that's why she made like a 2% rate of return, average annual return over the life of this contract when the market was actually doing very well during that time. So the moral of the story is even if you do your homework and you buy one of these annuities, which can sound incredibly attractive to people when they're worried about losing money, you will never lose money. Okay. They hear that and they go, I want that. Even if you do your homework and you say, I really understand this and I think it makes sense, the rules can change after the fact. and then you're stuck because these are generally sold as very high commission products in most cases. And so the person's doing it just to receive compensation.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for that explanation. I definitely was going to ask if that type of spread was normal, but you let us know that was not normal. So thank you for sharing that. So hindsight is 2020. What would have been a more appropriate strategy for someone? Obviously, she may have said something about, not wanting to lose money or had a more conservative approach. What would have been a more appropriate strategy instead of recommending this annuity and the 72T?
Well, one of the things that happens all the time is somebody comes in, maybe they don't know a lot about investing. In her case, she doesn't. She's one of our nurses that we help, doesn't know anything about investing. And they'll say things that trigger the salesman into selling a certain feature. And
Mhm,
they'll say something like, I am conservative. Okay, well, conservative is a subjective term. And
mhm,
then they'll say, yeah, I don't want to lose money. Well, nobody likes losing money. So in this case, I'm sure she said something like that. The guy goes, oh, well, we can put you into this annuity. You're never going to lose money. It's a conservative approach. She goes, okay, these things sound good to me. And she didn't really understand, the all of the ramifications of doing that. So in our case, all we do is align the tools and the strategy with what she's trying to accomplish. In the original, process, I would have used cash to almost for sure pay off all of her debts. In my mind, that is the most conservative approach you can take. By paying
mhm,
off debts, I save all of the interest associated with those types of debts. In this case, that person did not do that, which means she still had all the payments associated with her house and car payment and other things she had done where she financed these different debts. And that's why they set up the 72 income stream, was to help her basically pay for the bills because she still had debt. Well, the simpler approach would have been to use the cash to pay off the debt in the first place, but then the advisor doesn't get a commission for selling her the annuity. So that's the first thing I would have done. The second thing is she had kids that were going to get married. She had other like intermediate goals before retirement where she would need chunks of money. Well, it's
mhm,
very easy for us to set up a regular brokerage account where she can have a mix of investments, everything from conservative to aggressive. And then we can align those investments with when she's going to need the money. So if she needs $10,000 to help pay for a trip or a wedding or something for her house, we could have that money in a very safe, like a money market, or we could have that money in, more conservative type investments so that when she needs the money, we just send it out to her linked checking account. She's got the cash within 1 or 2 business days and she spends the money as needed. And it's not as tax efficient per se because she might have to pay taxes on those interest or dividends along the way, but at the same time most of her taxes would be capital gains, which are lower than income taxes. So the point is, and in this case that she actually had a brokerage account, but the advisor didn't use the brokerage account for what it was for. And I'm like, why aren't you accessing this money instead of this money? And she goes, I don't know. And that happens all the time.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing what we would have done instead. Is there anything else that you would like to leave with our viewers?
I think, it's so important to feel comfortable with the approach that someone is taking. If they lead with a feature, like you
Mm,
can't lose money, or taxes. We hear all the time people go, "Oh, well my person talks about taxes all the time." Or if they lead with, "You're going to make a ton of money on this investment." Those are things that are designed to give an emotional reaction. Like nobody likes to pay extra taxes. So if the person says, hey, we're going to do this in a tax efficient way, well, nobody knows what that actually means. But at
mhm,
the same time, it sounds really good. I'm not going to lose money. That sounds really good. If somebody is leading with a feature where, that's what they're trying to sell, in our case, we're leading with quality of life. What
mhm,
are you actually trying to accomplish, then our job is to align your resources as efficiently and effectively as we can to, produce the greatest probability of accomplishing that goal. That is a way more challenging conversation than, hey, I'm going to put you in this investment. You're never going to lose money. It's going to be tax deferred. This will be great.
Hmm. Well, thank you for pointing that out. I think that is something that our viewers can definitely be aware of when they are having conversations with advisors. Well, until next time, have a great one.
Thanks, Leah.
Thank you.